Words of Sri Aurobindo. The three stages or periods of sadhana. Number 2. Here there are two movements with a transitional stage between them, two periods of this yoga, one of the process of surrender, the other of its crown and consequence. In the first, the individual prepares himself for the reception of the divine into his members. For all this first period, he has to work by means of the instruments of the lower nature, but aided more and more from above. But in the later transitional stage of this movement, our personal and necessarily ignorant effort more and more dwindles and a higher nature acts. The eternal Shakti descends into this limited form of mortality and progressively possesses and transmutes it. In the second period, the greater movement wholly replaces the lesser, formerly indispensable first action. But this can be done only when our self-surrender is complete. The ego person in us cannot transform itself by its own force or will or knowledge or by any virtue of its own into the nature of the divine. All it can do is to fit itself for the transformation and make more and more its surrender to that which it seeks to become. As long as the ego is at work in us, our personal action is and must always be in its nature a part of the lower grades of existence. It is obscure or half enlightened, limited in its field, very partially effective in its power. If a spiritual transformation, not a mere illumining modification of our nature, is to be done at all, we must call in the divine Shakti to effect that miraculous work in the individual, for she alone has the needed force, decisive, all-wise, and illimitable. But the entire substitution of the divine for the human personal action is not at once entirely possible. All interference from below that would falsify the truth of the superior action must first be inhibited or rendered impotent, and it must be done by our own free choice. A continual and always repeated refusal of the impulsions and falsehoods of the lower nature is asked from us, and an insistent support to the truth as it grows in our parts. For the progressive settling into our nature and final perfection of the incoming informing light, purity and power needs for its development and sustenance our free acceptance of it and our stubborn rejection of all that is contrary to it, inferior or incompatible.